This is Your Money, Your Call.
Good evening and welcome to Your Money, Your Call. I'm Chris Gray. Now, joining us on our panel of experts tonight is Jane Slack-Smith. Welcome to the show. How would you describe the way that it's not worth paying off a property, you're better off going interest only?
I think when we look at people buying property these days, we're looking at people who are actually using the property they're currently in, which may not be the property that is where the grandkids come back to. So it's a stepping stone to their financial wealth. So if we look at the property they're in at the moment, if we could actually just pay interest only and keep the principal in an offset account, for instance, and allow them to improve their cash flow and get to a bigger deposit quicker, they could get into another property before they would normally have to if they were paying principal and interest. So even people in their own homes could use interest-only loans to improve their cash flow and use it as a stepping stone to purchase more properties.
And now we're joined by Lorraine from the Central Coast. Welcome, Lorraine.
Thank you. How are you?
Very good, thanks.
That's
What's
good.
your question?
I would like to ask just a little bit of a finance question here. I actually have two questions, but one anyway. We actually owned our own house and we bought a first investment property last year in about April. The bank we went through has taken our papers, our deeds to our house, and they advised us to take 100,000 equity out of our house, which is just sitting in a bank account waiting for us to purchase our second, third, whatever investment properties. I was just wondering if that was what we should have done.
Sure. And what was your second question after that as well?
The second question was my daughter, who's 24, has bought one investment property and has saved up 30,000 to go again, and I just didn't know whether she should use the equity out of her first house that she bought, or whether she should, is it a good thing to use the cash up? And I don't know.
Some good testing questions for you there.
Good questions, Lorraine. I guess from the point of view about did you do the right thing in accessing equity from your home, that's really what we've been talking about tonight. And it depends on how the lender did that. It sounds like you have a line of credit and you've taken that from your home, you've handed over the title to the bank, which is what happens. They need that as security. However, one of the, issues that a lot of people get into is they end up with a cross-collateralisation, which means that the bank is actually securing the new property against the old one as well. So it's important that you understand if you've got separate loans or if they're cross-collateralised. I guess one of the issues with cross-collateralisation is it's okay to a point, but after a while banks can start dictating terms such as we want you to have a principal and interest loan. And if you can imagine you have two properties, one in Perth, one in Sydney, the Perth property goes up in value, the Sydney property goes down in value. In actual fact, if the loans are separate, you might be able to access equity from the Perth property, but if they're cross-collateralised and there's neutral movement in the whole portfolio, then there's no equity that you can take out. So it's important in understanding if you are cross-collateralised or not. So what they have done is setting up that line of credit that allows you to go and use that money again for the second investment property. In essence, shouldn't be a bad thing. However, it's like a big credit card, the line of credit. You have to be very disciplined. And the good thing is that you don't actually pay any interest on any of the funds when they're not used. So if it's sitting there with a $100,000 limit and a $100,000 balance, you're not paying anything for it. I guess the second question about your daughter, in my opinion, don't leave the money on the table. Use the savings as a buffer. So I would be putting that $30,000 definitely into an offset account, which is essentially a savings account that can offset the interest on a mortgage. And I'd be looking at using equity from the property that she has, bearing in mind that she might have had mortgage insurance in the beginning and she might have to have additional mortgage insurance. So it depends on her certain circumstances. But I'd be looking at taking out equity and using a personal buffer as a savings.
I guess that's an elementary thing, is everyone thinks they've got to sell to re-access things. That's not the case, is it?
No, it isn't. The accessing equity that Peter's talking about is something that most investors do. So essentially they're buying a property, they're waiting for it to go up in value. Once it goes up in value, they can then tap into that equity. They don't need to sell the property to actually access those funds. And then they use those funds to go and buy another property or use them as deposits, usually to cover the deposit and the stamp duty. And then they get another loan, which then is, structured correctly. One of the problems is it's not always structured correctly.